People's books tell you a lot about them, and they play a special part in the life of my guest today. But not sacred books. Dame Barbara Goodman is a rationalist, and while she comes from a proud Jewish heritage, she believes knowledge and truth are discovered by reason and logic, not divine revelation. Barbara is a former Auckland mayoress and city councillor, and while on council, she championed many liberal causes, including women's and gay rights. Barbara took on the position of mayoress in 1968 after her divorced uncle, Sir Dovmar Robinson, needed someone to help out with his official duties.
Well, it would have been difficult for a person on their own to stand. Nowadays the climate is quite different. So he was having a meeting with friends and relatives, and they said to him, "Haven't you got a niece you could ask?" The arrangement was it would be for 3 years. Robbie would supply all my clothes, I'd have an interesting time, and that would be that.
So Dovmar.
But Robbie being Robbie, and I suppose me being me, the challenge that came along was 3 years became 6 years, became 9 years, became 12 years. And at that stage, from my personal point of view, my children were getting well into their teens, and I just thought that you must recognise when enough is enough.
It's a killing job for the mayor, and it's nearly as bad for the mayoress. Not quite.
Robbie couldn't accept that. He did stand on his own and got soundly defeated.
I think that the attitude of the general public of this country to people who've given a lifetime of service is most ungenerous.
I don't think he ever got over the feeling of being rejected by the population, and I think he held a little bit of it against me too. Both my parents were Jewish. We had a lot to do with my maternal grandmother, and we went to her place a great deal and were under her influence. She was a very interesting woman in that she was born in Latvia, escaped to England to link up with my grandfather, who had escaped ahead of her because he'd been impressed into the Tsar's army. And life for anyone in the Russian army, particularly a Jew, was terrible. And then they went ultimately to live in Glasgow and came to New Zealand. And I maintain that Grandma Rosie was the first feminist I ever met, because we used to go over there to help her when there were festivals on, and Passover was the main one, where the whole house had to be cleaned, the kitchen, crockery and cutlery changed, everything for the 8 days of Passover. And one time when we were in the middle of doing this, my grandmother said to me, "You know, I don't believe the Almighty," and she always referred to him as the Almighty, said that we should have to do this. I believe it was just the men to keep the women in the kitchen.
You were brought up by your parents as a Jew.
Yes.
But they didn't celebrate particularly the spiritual side.
Not at all. My father was a rationalist, and while he encouraged us to learn about Judaism, and we went to Sunday school, Hebrew school it was called, I think the song in Fiddler on the Roof is right, tradition. I was brought up in tradition.
There wasn't an attempt by you, as you embraced rationalism more and more, to renounce being a Jew?
When I was about 16, and I was feeling thwarted about something I wanted to do and I couldn't, and I wrote a letter to my father saying that I resigned from being Jewish. Yes, we can both laugh and smile, but I don't know how he managed to keep a straight face. Once you're a Jew, you're a Jew. And the story came to me recently that I think exemplifies that, and that was of two Jewish men walking along the street, and they went past a synagogue. Now, one of them, unfortunately, had a deformity. His back was hunched. He was a hunchback. And as they went past the synagogue, the one man turned to the hunchback and said, "I used to be a Jew." And the other one replied, "And I used to be a hunchback." It's a funny dichotomy, but it's born into you. You're born a Jew.
Kind of inescapable cultural identity.
Exactly. And this is the attitude we took with bringing up the children, that they were Jewish and they had every right to know what being a Jew was about, because they could not escape it. They would always be identified by others and themselves as being Jews. So while we weren't a strictly Orthodox household, we certainly adhered to a lot of the Orthodox customs.
And obviously they've been free to choose whether they embrace the spiritual side of Judaism or not. Where have the children gone in that regard?
I can only say where I think they've gone, because I wouldn't presume to speak for them. I believe my daughter has no spiritual belief. Both the boys have 2 children, and they have brought their children up to be conscious of being Jews. Stephen is more publicly seen as being active.
This is your son, Stephen?
My elder son, because he heads the New Zealand Jewish Council. But there again, it's not a religious organisation. It's about how things are affecting Jews.
What is your view about their decision, should they take it, to embrace the spiritual side of Judaism? Is
That's entirely up to them. My attitude was, as we said in the beginning, that you're born a Jew, and therefore they had to learn what being a Jew was about. And then it's over to them, and I wouldn't influence them either way.
Is there a rationalist society of some kind in Auckland?
Yes, there is. It's called the Rationalist and Humanist Society, and they have a rationalist house, which is, as one comes up Wakefield Street, it's right in front of you, Rationalist House. And I always say, well, that's one up to my dad, because he was instrumental with others in purchasing Rationalist House. And in the 80s, when people were demolishing all the buildings in Simon Street and putting up new ones, Rationalist House stood out alone, and it's still there.
What then is a rationalist?
From my terms anyway, if I look at the religious teaching and try to reason it, they just don't correlate. And I would rather look at reason than have a blind belief in something that I have to believe because I have to believe it. I'd rather take responsibility for my own life. I'd rather use reason.
So part of being a rationalist then in relation to religion is a rejection of the idea of God?
Oh, well, with me it
Yes,
certainly is.
yes.
Yes. I don't believe that there is anyone guiding our fate, guiding our hands. We are the person who must make the decision of how we're going to live our lives and not rely on any external influence.
Right. So also a rejection of the idea of the supernatural?
Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So if you're ordering your life according to rationality or reason, is there a suggestion there that human life is rational?
No. We do a whole lot of irrational things, but it does teach you to think, and the symbol that the Rationalist Association uses is Rodin's The Thinker, the figure like that, because you are thinking. We have inbuilt prejudices. Some we recognise and can't change, some we recognise and do change, but we are such a complex person that it's impossible to be rational the whole time.
Let's just explore where this goes, because I think especially for people from a religious background, it's kind of new territory, perhaps. How do you understand truth? If truth doesn't come by, if you like, divine decree, how do we understand what truth is?
I believe that what I believe is truthful, but and I have no doubt that others believe contrarily to me, but believe it is the truth. When there have been several witnesses at an accident, the police will say each witness has given a different account of the exact same thing that they saw.
Right. So truth then is a subjective thing.
Yes.
And do we as a community negotiate a shared truth by which we live our communal lives?
Yes, we do. For instance, that we believe that it is wrong and punishable to kill someone,
Right.
to steal, all those sort of things are communal beliefs and truths. But the basis of our belief in those might differ.
As a rationalist, what do you consider to be the meaning of life, the point of, if there is a point, of our existence?
Well, I can give it to you in one word.
Yes.
Procreation.
Why do you say that?
Because every living thing, whether it be animal or plant, procreation is their aim for the next generation and the next generation. And in a way, this is why some of the wars are fought, to get rid of the others and let your progeny continue on.
Do you think that the Jewish history of persecution has contributed in any way to the emergence of a form of Jewish rationalism?
Yes, yes, because I think under persecution one would either become even more religious, and this is one reason why I back traditional Judaism in my life, because many of my ancestors lived for their religion and died for their religion. I have a friend in America who is a survivor, who's got the tattoos on his arm, and he is Jewish, but he has no religious belief whatsoever, and there'd be no middle ground. You'd either become staunch in your religion or completely discard that aspect of it. I was appalled, for instance, at the Destiny Church's march in Wellington a year or two ago, where their knowledge of history and their lack of sensitivity of what had gone on, not just to Jews, but to a lot of other people during the war, that they could march in the street wearing black shirts and hands going up in the air and chanting. And that was appalling, and yet they have adherents. But I don't think those people would have any knowledge of the background of what went on before.
The newer religions that we're seeing tend to be much more proselytising and seem to be quite attractive to a sector of the community. Have you any thoughts on why that might be?
Well, I know that there are intelligent people involved in these things. I think that a lot of people are looking for something, and something that will be safe and tell them what to do and how to do it. So it's probably very comforting for them because the rules are all set, you don't have to think, you just do as you're told. Rationalists tend to be people who are very interested in intellectual debate, and when we grew up, we would invariably talk politics around the dinner table, because in those days families actually sat down and had their evening meal together. But the politics we discussed were not national and Labour, they were about how policies affect people's lives, and that carried through into a lot of the thinking I did when I was on the Auckland City Council, that I realised that the decisions I was involved in making were going to directly affect other people's lives. And it's a very big responsibility. And although on City Council I stood for a group, we were all independents, and if we ever met, we didn't actually caucus as such, but if ever we met to discuss something, I would say, well, this is my opinion and this is how I intend to vote. so I could act as an individual. Individualism is very important to me.
At one stage when you were involved with the council, there was an issue around the question of prayers before council meetings.
Yes, at that stage, the mayor and deputy mayor and several of the others were of a very strong, upright religious belief. And they thought it would be a good idea to have a prayer, open the council meeting with a prayer. And my sense of justice, as well as being Jewish and being a rationalist, it offended my sense of justice because it was going to be excluding people. Because people said, oh, well, if we have the prayer and people don't want to take part in it, they can go out of the room. So I made my impassioned page-and-a-half speech, and I won. They voted not to have prayers before the meeting. One suggestion that I did make was that there is a room across from the council chamber. So I suggested in my speech that if people wanted to have prayers, there was that room available and they should go in there prior to the meeting. I used to go in there after this episode, and none of the others ever came in. And in that connection, I am bitterly disappointed that Parliament still starts with a prayer.
As a rationalist, where do you then get your moral compass from?
It was how I was brought up, that you respected other people, that you helped other people. I was involved, I suppose, in three very big things. The repeal petition, which was when government tried to bring, or did bring in for a brief time, extremely restrictive laws on abortion. And I suppose that the other things that I've been involved in have either involved people's choices or opportunities for people.
You've been very involved with Odyssey House.
In Odyssey House, yes. I established that and I chaired it for its first 11 years, which was wonderful. And I learnt a lot, but when we first started up, it was such a struggle. We used to literally run cake stalls to raise money for it because in the 1970s, most of the other forms of drug rehabilitation were this lovey-dovey, all warm and let's sit round and smoke pot together type of thing. So Odyssey House was entirely different.
They came and disrupted our march.
I set up at the time of the homosexual law reform bill, we called it Campaign for Tolerance, and my first donation came from one of my sons.
I think a lot of us sat back and watched what was happening in the antics of a very extreme group of people, and one thing piled on top of another, and suddenly we said enough.
Whatever I did, Harold was 100% behind me, and the children were, they accepted it. So I've been free to do as I want, do as I like. Robbie was wonderful to me. I used to joke with him and say, I'll tell you where I'm going. I'm not going to be asking permission, but I'm going to tell you. So when Germaine Greer came and spoke at the town hall, I told him I was going to do that. And that was when she used the words and got taken to court.
I went down to the demonstration outside of the Magistrates' Court in Auckland, where she was inside being had up for saying bullshit.
Tell me, what do you feel now about New Zealand justice?
I think it works like it does in most places. The law is an ass anywhere.
In my growing up formative years, I was a great reader. I used to get off the tram at the top of Parnell Road, go to the library, take out the 2 prescribed books that you were only allowed, walk down the road to my house reading it, next day return those 2 books and things. But I did read quite a lot about the British Empire, Rudyard Kipling and things like that, and so I suppose a bit jingoistic. And I came across this poem, which is, to me, summed up and still does sum up my beliefs, and it's called Invictus. Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody, but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters not how strait the gate, how charged with punishment the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul.
Tell us about the values, if you like, that ring true for you, especially in that poem, Barbara.
We all go through being bludgeoned by fate, but I don't believe my soul has been conquered by the things that have happened to me, the adverse things. And although I love history, and I'm going to use a biblical thing here, I am not Lot's wife. I don't look back over my shoulder. I believe in moving on, so bloody but unbowed, you move on. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid of death or anything. In fact, I'm a fatalist. I get on a plane and if it crashes, it crashes there. And the last two lines are absolutely what buoy me on. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul.
Do you think that as a rationalist, you, if you like, grab hold of this life with both hands?
Yes. Yes, when Harold died, for instance, I thought, my heart is still beating, my lungs are still working, get on with it.
Right, right.
And that's what I hope will happen till the end.
I know that you have a lot of interests beyond your political and social commitments. What are the other personal things that you find satisfying?
Family, reading. I helped set up the Embroiderers Guild. I'm not very good at my embroidery now. I've got about a dozen pieces I've started and never finished.
Where's the Stein brand come from? Yeah, of those, yeah, so they're Turkish.
And you cook?
Yes, spasmodically. I love cooking when I'm in the mood to cook. I'm slightly handicapped now because I'm in the early stages of Parkinson's, which slows things down a bit and, makes doing some of the finer things. But I still do it. And now that I'm retired, I can plan, and I can plan for 3 days and do bits as I go along. But there are occasions, because I live alone, where it gets to evening mealtime, I think, oh, I should eat. What am I going to do? I don't know. So I turn on the food channel on television. I don't copy what they're doing, but I get their enthusiasm. And I think this is one of the things I enjoy in life, is interaction with people and getting enthusiastic, as I am with you at the moment, and even sort of vicariously on the food channel. So I'll sort of get out the broccoli and defrost something and get on with it. But yeah, I do love cooking and having people around.
Barbara, ready, set, go.
I go to the gym, not from want, but from need.
Barbara, 6.27.
And I'm very disappointed that I'm doing well, because if I wasn't, it'd give me an excuse not to.
Do you look for an excuse not to?
Oh, absolutely.
Right, standing up just over by the yellow line.
It's run by the YMCA, and it's called Never Too Old.
Look at Sam.
And it's a group round about my age group. But it's almost a form of blackmail, because my sister goes, my cousin goes, several great friends go. And if you don't go to the gym, someone's bound to phone you and say, almost in an accusing manner, you weren't at the gym this morning.
Some very effective social blackmail.
Well, it is indeed, but it is a very enjoyable. Once you get there, it's very enjoyable. But if I had my druthers, I wouldn't exercise. But I do know that it is very necessary, and I can see the results of it.
Barbara, sometime after Harold died, you met and formed a close relationship with an American Orthodox rabbi.
Yes.
How did At a kind of intellectual or philosophical level, how did that relationship work?
Well, this went on for 11 years, I think extremely well, because he knew from the beginning that I was an atheist. I knew from the beginning he was an Orthodox rabbi. And although I had been brought up not strictly Orthodox, it was within an Orthodox content and milieu, so I knew what he was on about. And I would adhere to all the kosher requirements, which didn't worry me in the slightest to do. And he could accept that I was an atheist. But one very funny thing happened early in our relationship. He took some friends out for a meal to meet me, and it was in a restaurant that did have a kosher section, thank goodness. And we were all sitting there eating, and these friends of Arthur's were very wealthy people, very nice, and I'm still friends with them, but wealthy and well-placed. And out of the blue, he sort of indicated to me, and he said, she's an atheist and a socialist. And they absolutely, literally froze hands and, like this with knife and fork in them. I don't know which astounded them the most, that I was an atheist or a socialist, or maybe it was both. But they did accept me for that, and so did he.
Looking back on your life thus far, Barbara, what would you say was your greatest achievement?
To have survived 74 years is an achievement in its way. I suppose I've had lots of forms of happiness, of being able to help people, to convince council to do things that will help people, but also on a very personal level, meeting and marrying this wonderful man, Harold Goodman, and having 3 children.
Is there anything you would have changed?
Yes. I think I would have shown appreciation more towards my mother. She was a wonderful woman, and we knew that and realised it, but other than me buying her a bunch of violets on my way home from work or something like that, I don't think we really ever acknowledged the appreciation that we should have towards her. I don't think I'm alone in that. I hear a lot of people saying that they didn't give their mother what she was due.
I'll go and ring mine now.
I think you should.
This program was made with funding from New Zealand On Air.